Earlier this year, Freedom Road Records released a remarkable new album titled Act One, spotlighting the extraordinary talents of New York-based flutist Janet Axelrod. This dynamic recording brings together a collection of brand new works for flute penned by some of Broadway's most celebrated composers, including David Chase, Gary Adler, Joseph Church, and more. If Janet Axelrod's name is new to you, her resume reads like a who's who of the musical theater world. A virtuosic performer with decades of experience, she held the solo flute and piccolo chair at Radio City Music Hall for 20 years and has performed in iconic productions like The Lion King, Wicked, Phantom of the Opera, and Finding Neverland, just to name a few. Today, Axelrod continues to perform with the New York City Opera, the New Jersey Symphony Orchestra, and the Orchestra of St. Luke's. Beyond the stage, she's a passionate educator, having led masterclasses at top institutions such as the Juilliard School and the Manhattan School of Music. And joining me here over Zoom to talk about her fabulous new recording called Act One, I am joined by Janet Axelrod. Hey, Janet, great to meet you here over Zoom.
Hi, Chris. It's great to meet you too. Thank you for having me.
Mm. So before we get to the disc, I was reading your bio, and one thing jumped out at me right away. You performed the Pet Sounds album with Brian Wilson, who sadly passed away just yesterday.
Yeah.
What was he like, and what was he like to work with?
Well, I was in a large orchestra, and he brought some of his own musicians for the core, rhythm section musicians.
Hmm.
But he was inspiring. He knew exactly what he wanted. He knew what he wanted to hear. He was very clear with the conductor. And for us, it was just a moment of history.
Yeah.
To be able to be part of that palette
Yeah.
live was incredible. And it was at Radio City Music Hall too. So,
Mm.
it was a special event.
Hmm. I'm interested in how you got into performing Broadway musicals professionally. How did you get the job at Radio City Music Hall? And would you say the playing environment at Radio City is different than playing in a traditional orchestra setting?
Oh, absolutely. So the job started, I started as a substitute, which we call subs,
Hmm.
right? And in those days, um, as a substitute, you got called like pretty much as an emergency, and you went there and you sight read.
Hmm.
And so I must have done an okay job following the cuts. And so they had me back, and I subbed there for many years until very, very sadly, the man who had the job for over 40 years passed away.
Mm.
And at that point, I was given a year of probationary playing. So I played the entire season for the Rockettes, and then I was offered the job. So whatever circumstances led to it, it ended up lasting for me for over 20 years.
Hmm.
And it was a very large, consistent orchestra. Times have changed what it is now.
Hmm.
And I won't go into all the details of that. But it was a family like any other orchestra, except we did from 4 to 6 shows a day.
Yeah.
So there was
Wow.
a very big element of having a conservative nature that could handle that kind of pressure.
Right. And
So
I would imagine you have to be able to play all styles, classical, jazz, pop, whatever's asked, right?
yeah, it was the most incredible experience for me because I was working in a section that had not only people that were chosen specifically by um, it wasn't Stokowski, but conductors of that era
Yeah.
that were here in New York. Um, but also all the guys from the jazz bands that had been touring and then kind of settled down to have their families and stuff.
Mm.
So I learned an incredible amount from both sections. I really learned how to play commercial music, and I've been listening to jazz my whole life.
Hmm.
So to get to play with those guys
Yeah.
was extremely informative, and I'm so grateful for it.
Hmm. And you've done like a lot of like recording session work. You've recorded stuff for PBS, Sesame Street. I grew up on Sesame Street. The Marvelous Mrs. Maisel. Did that work come out as a result of your work at Radio City Music Hall?
I
Did the
think
word just get out, or?
probably some of it did. So, your name gets out there when
Yeah.
you're in a place for a while. And certainly some of it came from my work at Radio City. But
Mm,
I've now, at that point, was the beginning of my Broadway time as well,
mm,
where I started out as a sub and then eventually got called for a few shows. But in between shows, you always sub,
right.
to stay busy as a working freelancer. So
Yeah.
you meet a lot of different communities of people. You meet a lot of different music directors and orchestrators and arrangers. And then when they need your style or your particular voice, then you get the call.
Yeah. Uh, the album Act One is just great. It consists of six wonderful new pieces for flute written by composers who you've performed with. Can you talk about the commissioning process? Was it simply as easy as just asking the composers to write a piece of music for me? Like, did you have to apply for a grant to pay them and record it? Like, how did the commissioning process work?
Well, I started this with this idea that I have spent my life in music. It wasn't exactly what I planned to do, but it is what happened. And I kept getting lucky and I kept enjoying it. So I was thinking about how to give back, actually, how to give back to the community.
Mm,
And I've taught every level and continue from not kindergarten on flute, but maybe first graders on flute, all the way through professionals that I work with on Broadway.
mm, right.
And it seemed to me like we have a lot of repertoire that we were still using from when I was a student.
Mm,
And I thought about how to freshen that up and that maybe I could commission pieces in order to freshen that up and leave for the next generation. So
oh,
that was the spark of the idea. And so I thought about what would be fair and what I could afford personally without having to apply for grants because grants might or might not allow it to happen.
right.
I decided I really wanted it to happen.
Mm,
So I came up with a number and I talked to composers. I said, you can say no, but here's my idea. And my idea consists of giving it its premiere performance and giving it its first recording and then setting it out into the world for other people to play.
mm,
And of course, the hope that these pieces are beautiful and that people in my community or other instrumentalists want to recommission these composers.
and mission accomplished. I mean, one of the things that struck me about the disc, I mean, when I first saw the CD, I thought, oh, the music is it's gonna sound like Broadway music. It's gonna, be the yet and it isn't. Every single piece on the disc could be part of a flute recital. Did you give the composers any like suggestions as to what you wanted, or did you just let them go and do their thing?
I didn't just let them go and do their thing because I used to have
Hmm.
a nonprofit new music group. And sometimes if you let composers just do their thing, you end up with a piece of paper that says, repeat anything you want 5 times.
Right.
And I didn't want that kind of esoteric experience. So, um, believe it or not, the guideline was to create something that had melody, which they're all fantastic at,
Hmm.
that had groove, which is missing sometimes from classical recital repertoire,
Hmm.
but that makes it really fun to practice, and that it had enough technique to make it challenging enough to practice.
Mm,
And the last thing was my cornball side, which was I'd like it to have a feel, but not be jazz-esque, like the bowling suite for flute and jazz piano,
right.
which was popular when I was first practicing. And that made flute players really excited.
Yeah.
It
Yeah.
was different enough.
Mhm.
So that was my guideline.
And I want to I want to turn to the literature on the disc. You've got a piece called Touch and Go. It was written by Joshua Rosenblum in 2020. Touch and Go, when I think of 2020, I think of COVID and all the touch
That's
and
what
go
he
that was
thought.
going on
Yeah.
there.
Yeah.
But can you talk about musically? What does Touch and Go refer to in the piece?
I would have to grab his actual liner notes because everyone wrote their own liner notes. But that was the biggest part of it when we were going through COVID was that he made a musical version of that. Okay, we're going to be let go. We're going to be out of isolation, and then nope, clamped down for another 5 weeks. And he wrote piece of music that also does that. So the lyricism is interspersed with some fantastic kind of jazz driving rhythms.
So you get the
And
touch,
also,
the
maybe personally, I would reach a certain place with this project and then have to back off because I'd have a lot of work.
right.
And then we'd go again. So yeah.
Mm. Uh, I love French Impressionism, and one of the instruments I always think about when it comes to French Impressionism is flute. Of course, Debussy, Afternoon of a Faun, Ravel, Daphnis and Chloe, all that beautiful flute writing. Can you talk about your friendship with Mary Mitchell Campbell and her piece Feuille dans Rousseau and what the title translates to?
The title I had to look it up, translate to like falling leaves.
Hmm.
And so my introduction to Mary Mitchell Campbell was Finding Neverland, the Broadway musical where she was the music director.
Mm.
And she's been the music director of dozens of musicals. But this was my first time actually meeting her and working with her.
Mm.
Subsequently, I've worked with her at City Center, where she's the director now of the Encore series. Um, and she's brilliant. And she knows how to get what she wants in a way that all her musicians feel respected. And
Mm.
it's such a rare blend. And I just knew I couldn't wait to hear what she was going to compose because I had no idea.
Yeah.
And
It's
it's her piece is so incredible. And the way that she plays it on that album,
yeah.
you know,
It's
it's,
fantastic.
yeah,
And that is one of the things on the record, the composers are playing all the piano parts, right?
except for one. Yeah.
Mm. Which one, which piece?
So Joseph Church's piece is played by Elizabeth DeFelice,
Mm.
who's, world class, amazing classical pianist.
Mm. One of the things that struck me when I was listening to David Chase's piece, Jump Scares, is there must be a visual element. I mean, there's a very clear moment where you're turning the page wildly and whatever. Can you talk about that piece and why did you want to poke fun at this idea of recital decorum and how to behave at a recital?
I think he was responding um, to my request that it not be a staid recital kind of where you're not allowed to invest yourself in it.
Mm,
And I wanted pieces that would be and could be interpreted by the young musicians.
right.
And so we have a lot of rules. And when you study Bach and Mozart, you need to know what was historically correct. And I want music now, though, where people can learn to express themselves within the boundaries of correctness. Like, still have to
Yeah.
play what's on the page, right?
Yeah. Right. Right.
But you can play it in your own way, and you can make your own music and your own expression out of it, which is kind of a theater thing, right?
Mm,
So you create your own character, and you can portray this more differently than anybody else has. Um, yes, when we performed it live recently, there's a most excellent visual. But don't you hear that in concerts that you go to? People's
yes.
pages being turned wildly. So,
Yeah.
so yeah, I thought it was brilliant.
Or even worse, the page turning and the sheet music falling off the stand and it going into oblivion.
Yeah, yeah, been there.
Who is Harvey Schmidt? Judging by the music that was written and for him by Gary Adler, he must have been a remarkable influence. Can you talk about that piece on your CD called For Harvey?
For Harvey. So Gary wrote this Harvey Schmidt was one of his main mentors.
Mm,
And I believe he wrote The Fantastics.
mm.
And it's been a minute since I read the program notes, at which Gary worked on in New York for maybe its whole run.
Okay.
But it's one of his main influences. So all of the composer program notes actually are on my website. So
Mhm.
instead of misinterpreting them, I would love for the listeners to be able to see exactly what the composers wrote. Um, and
What's the
my
website for
website
that?
is janetaxelrod.com.
Perfect.
So yeah, all of their notes and some notes about the commissioning process.
Mm, mm. There is a work on the disc that it's a full-on flute sonata. It's just a stunner. It's Joseph Church's Oasis. Uh, Long Island must be gorgeous. Can you talk about the piece and some of the things that he tries to depict in the music?
This was a fantastic rehearsal process because it is really a recital piece. It's by far the longest piece on the disc. And Joe brought out environments in his music that you can feel, you
Yeah.
can see and feel. So Oasis was named after going to Long Island during COVID, and it was
Okay.
his oasis. And you know how we all started to feel and hear nature that we hadn't heard in a long time because there weren't people around to scare it away. So you hear the frogs and you hear the birds, and they're depicted so beautifully for flute and piano, and we imitate each other. There's also the sort of an elegy, a funeral for a frog in
Mm.
one of the movements,
Yeah,
which he
yeah.
experienced. And it might be one of my favorite melodies in life to play because he had to hold me back because you just want to build it and build it. I can't wait for other people to perform this composition.
Mm. That's great. And the last piece on the disc is this piece by Georgia Still, her duet for flute and piano.
Stit,
As a
actually. Stit.
Yeah,
Yeah.
Stitch, yes.
Yeah.
Can you talk about the importance of the number five in that piece?
She wrote in her program notes about the number five being some bars that were in 5/4, um, and just using it compositionally to create um, some boundaries for herself, I think. But
Mm.
it's now we had so much fun performing it, and it's so beautiful. She decided it would be duet number one. So the indication is we're going to have some more music from Georgia Stitt.
Yeah, yeah,
Yeah.
it's a great piece. You've talked about it before. It's such a great disc. Your hope is that the music on Act One will make it on flute recitals. One of the other things I noticed when I was prepping for the interview is a lot of the music is already for sale, right?
Yes. So I'm putting it up, and the composers are putting it up on Sheet Music Plus, which is a Hal Leonard
Hmm.
publishing company. Um, and it's all very reasonable, and it's if it's not all available yet, it will be. I think we had actually a couple of page turn issues to try to suss out
Thanks.
before putting it out there. um, but it will all be I would say by the end of the summer, all will be available publicly.
Perfect for flute players
Yeah.
to start practicing for their, I guess, November juries and November recitals.
I'm hoping juries on auditions, it's fresh music, but
Hmm.
it's not it's so welcoming,
Yeah,
I think. I'm so glad you like the CD.
yeah, it's lovely. Janet, yeah, it really is a remarkable disc. A big congratulations to you. I got to say, I'm super glad my friend Amanda at Crossover Media sent me the tracks and got me in touch with you. I also program the music here at Classic 107. This disc is in now full rotation. I just love
Oh,
it. All
thank
the
you.
all the best, and thanks for making the time to sit down and chat with me about the CD. It's remarkable.
I'm grateful to talk with you. Thank you for everything you're doing for the disc.